Hello guys, how's it going? My name is Dal, and the patch 1107 is releasing so soon now, which means this is going to be the final chance for everybody to have that Season 1 push for endgame progression content, whether you're PvPing, raiding, delving, or trudging your way through Mythic Plus dungeons. Now would be the best time to come back to the game and finish out for all of your seasonal rewards. When it comes to class changes, 1107 is actually light on those. For the most part, it is bringing in a brand new powerful gem ring that may unlock some potential for a handful of playstyles, but for the most part, it's going to simply buff up everything that is already strong. There's also a slight racial overhaul as well, but for the most part, it shouldn't make too many changes when it comes to the overall meta, which means that the meta for Season 1 is pretty much secure. So if you were making a comeback to finish out your AOTCs and your KSMs or Keystone Hero achievements, but are most likely going to end up pugging your way through the content, you might as well play some of the best classes out there to have the easiest time with those pug groups to finish out your Season 1. And in today's video, I'm going to go over all of the best classes that you should probably start prepping now if you're going to be pugging your way through the rest of the Season 1 content. As always, if you guys want to see more regular War Within updates like these on the channel, be sure to follow and subscribe, but otherwise, let's dive right in. I want to separate this video by class roles, starting with melee DPS, then heading into rage DPS, healers, and then finish things off with tanks. Out of all the melee DPS, 4 stand out the most when it comes to endgame PvE content, with Enhancement Shaman probably taking the crown right now. Some of the best utility in the game from a variety of different useful totems that you could put down, whether for personal survivability, group crowd control, and even the game-breaking potential of Windrush Totem with the Jetstream talent, which instead of removing or countering a slowing effect, it instead dispels it, so it functions very differently, giving them a unique advantage amongst some of the other classes, plus with the power that is Enhancement, literally doing the most amount of melee damage of any class. Literally, Enhancement right now is the very best of its class amongst other DPS classes, with a diverse toolkit that's incredibly good for Mythic Plus content. So if you're looking to push, this is literally the best class out there right now. But also, the fact that Enhancement is in a group enables the use of some of the other classes to be in a bit more of a competitive spot. That's just how good it is. It brings just enough additional utility in order to allow other classes to shine brighter than normal, which makes Enhancements a pretty nice staple to put into every group in endgame content. Outside of this though, Frost Death Knights are also a fantastic choice with a great damage profile for both waiting as well as Mythic Plus. What really gives Death Knights right now an edge, however, is just how insanely tanky they are, especially for dungeons, which makes them incredibly good for groups. Plus, Death Knight's unique utility of being able to grip enemies to you right now in this current season is incredibly powerful utility, which changes depending on the season, depending on the dungeons that we are in. But right now in this current meta, it's incredibly valuable, which makes Frost Death Knights a shining example as well. Assassination Rogue is another good one, which is just a great class with fantastic damage output, also very self-sufficient and survivable. Won't say they're as tanky as Frost Death Knights, but the fact that they can immune damage and even the regular uses of Feint against AoE damage does make them a nice one to bring into most groups. Plus, rogues have historically been generally good for Mythic Plus as well. Retribution Paladin is another standout that I think is definitely worth mentioning. It is one of the easiest specs to play, as one of the easiest ones to get intro, which makes him a great choice for entry-level players, especially if you just want to have the easiest time getting onto a class, gearing up, and doing fantastic damage output within Mythic Plus content, and they have a very good damage profile that makes them really good in raids and dungeons. Paladins also bring insane amount of great utility, and Retribution Paladin is no slouch at that either, and they're a great pick for pug content. However, normally, Paladins would have, Retribution specifically, a lot better of a representation in the overall meta. However, because of the current best tank right now in the game, you don't really need two Paladins to double up on one another, but still, Retribution is a fantastic choice and is often swapped out with the Augmentation Evoker, which is a really popular range choice, as an alternative because of just that's how good it is in the current meta. Then we have the ranged DPS classes, starting with Augmentation Evoker, a unique buff-focused class that fits into any group composition. Because of their buff-oriented playstyle, they all not only enhance themselves but also their allies like DPS, healers as well as the tanks of their group. Augmentation Evokers have, ever since they were added in the game, been one of the better classes to play as a range class if you're just looking to pick something that's very pug friendly and can fit in any group composition, as it simply just augments and accents all of your party members, and that's what really makes them super viable and easy to place into any group. They're also very easy to play too, so if you're a brand new player, want to pick up a great range class, they are generally a great recommendation choice. With plenty of abilities like knockups and AoE disruptions, which are super viable right now in the current meta, Augmentation is just set up in a fantastic spot that offers some of the best utility that can come from just one singular class. Outside of that, however, some of the other best range choices out there, which are a lot more even to one another than you would think, but Frost Mages are fantastic. They've been a great class for AoE content with the Blizzards as well as Frozen Orbs, plenty of personal survivability, as mages have always naturally have had a knack for tankiness, and they have decent bit of utility that works pretty well in the current meta of seasonal dungeons. Elemental Shaman is basically enhancement but ranged, but technically enhancement is a little bit better, which is why most people that do play Shaman do prefer to play enhancement. That being said, if your preference is to be a ranged Shaman instead, it's a perfectly viable option as well, as you bring in exactly the same strengths and utility of enhancement Shaman just from a more ranged counterpart. Balanced Druid is also a perfectly viable DPS choice right now in the current meta, though he does have a unique set of challenges that he needs to overcome in order to be able to compete well. Like on its own, it's just fine as a class, but it does have some things that make it unique from some of the other range options, such as Solar Beam Interrupt, which can be a bit of a blessing but also a bit of a curse. In a group situation with a bunch of caster enemies, being able to silence all of them at once adds even more to your group's control. But at the same time, you're trading out having a proper interrupt at a moment's notice, so you'll need to make sure that your group composition has plenty of kicks without you in order to make sure that your group does not fall behind on enemy casts. Balanced Druids are also amazing when it comes to the overall damage. However, they do need the mobs to live long enough for their damage to be fully ramped up and out and about. So if enemies are not living long enough, you won't really see Balanced Druids shining as brightly as they could be, but in some of the more higher tier dungeons with some of the more healthier enemies, that's where you could really see the full power of Balanced Druid, which again, like I said, they have a bit of a kiss and a curse set of hurdles for them to overcome. Next, we have the role of the healers, where there are really two that are a standout, although I wish a lot more healers were a lot more viable when it comes to higher end content, because there's so many fun playstyles out there. But when it comes to PvE content, right now it does seem like Priest and Restoration Shaman are your two best picks. Disc Priest in particular is an incredibly great healer for M+ content, as it has the most pump of any healer available at a moment's notice. Where other healers have to play heavily around some of their cooldowns, Disc Priest play more around a setup and shorter CDs, but as long as those cooldowns are lined up together, they have some of the best throughput out there. However, when there's a plus, there's also a bit of a minus with every single class out there, as Disc Priests are not necessarily mobile or really have the best defenses. So they do require a bit more of a pre-made group to shine the brightest, but in a pre-made group, that's where they excel in, or at least within certain compositions, and pairing a Disc Priest together with someone like a Prop Paladin, maybe an Augmentation Evoker, and of course a Shaman in the group does help them be a little bit better, since those other classes can cover some of the weaknesses the Discipline Priest brings in with it, but this also allows them to fully shine with the amazing damage, but also the healing throughput that they can do, where they can, in right situations, can out-heal most of the deadly situations out there. The second closest to a Disc Priest is a Resto Shaman, and I mean razor thin second close. No doubt Restoration Shaman is a great choice, and an overall, personally, amazing all-rounder with that good Shaman utility. I mean, we mentioned Ellie, we mentioned enhancement, and it's good to see that the entire kit of the class of Shaman, even restoration options, are also viable here as well. I would even say the Restoration to some degree has a slight advantage over Disc Priest, primarily in the fact that it's a more pug-friendly choice. If you're someone who's primarily going to be doing Mythic Plus or any push content, and you're primarily going to be doing it through pug groups, then I think Restoration Shaman is actually better a lot better, as it places a lot more control into the player's hands, whereas disc-based you need to rely on your group a little bit more and lean in on certain classes, and basically they have to pick up your slack so you can push out the best healing out there. Restoration Shaman still puts out very good competitive healing, not quite as high as disc in the best regards, but the extra control, the CC, the totems, all that extra functionality I think does give them a slight edge, especially if you're going to be doing and playing with random groups. And when it comes to tanks right now, tanks are having the hardest time within Mythic Plus content, and they are probably the most challenging role to play with right now in the current season. Some would even say playing a tank right now is a bit more punishing than any other role out there, and these guys really do have a lot of responsibility on their shoulders within the first season of War Within. But right now, the best tank unequivocally at this moment is the Protection Paladin, and it's not even close. Whereas with some of the other roles, there's at least a bit of disparity, a little bit of the gap between the classes is not nearly as high. But for tanks right now, you got to play the very best in order to have the easiest time in Mythic Plus content. And Prop Paladin right now has some of the best utility of any tank in the game, with some of the best and most consistent defensive abilities and even immunities without even breaking the aggro from all of the enemies around you, with loads of interrupts for so many pesky caster enemies that I feel like are filled in literally every single dungeon, with so many deadly casts where if a single one of them is even missed, it likely leads to a group wipe, and in a high enough or in challenging enough content, that could potentially mean the end of a run. Plus, Protection Paladins also do enable the ability for Discipline Priests to shine, which is a unique aspect to them, whereas Disc Priests don't really bring a lot of mobility or great defenses. Prop Paladins help them cover on that front as well. This means that the group is going to have fantastic throughput healing, while you'd have to pick up a lot more of the slack for the rest of your party. And hopefully in the future we'll see a little bit less of a disparity between the tanks, and I would love for there to be more viable options between the different tanking picks, especially with some of the lesser popular performers such as Blood Death Knights and Brewmaster Monk. I would really love to see some of those playstyles be a little bit higher towards the top at some point in the next season. But going forward for the rest of the season, definitely try to be a little bit nicer to your tanks, as anybody playing this role in particular has a lot to deal with, especially with some of the higher end content. But if you're someone who is brave enough to get into the tanking role for the end of the season, then Protection Paladin is going to serve you nicely as we head into the season 2. But with that, as always, I want to thank all of you guys so much for watching this list video, and I hope you guys did enjoy it. If you did enjoy it or found it informative, go ahead and give this video a like. I would very much appreciate it. Join our Discord community for regular War Within updates. Also, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below, and as always, I'll see all of you guys in our next one.